I am not psychic. Therefore, I have never seen a ghost or heard its voice. Even so, I had one very frightening experience when I was in junior high school. I would like to share that story with you. When I was 14 years old, my father died and I had to move to my mother's house. My grandfather on my mother's side had already passed away, so it was just the three of us women, my grandmother, my mother, and myself. Still reeling from the shock of my parents' death, I had to quickly adjust to my new surroundings. I was anxious, but perhaps out of sympathy for my situation, my classmates at my new school treated me kindly. One girl in particular, Ms. S., was very kind to me. As I had just transferred to her school, she showed me textbooks and talked with me. She became my best friend, and I naturally opened up to the people around me. By the end of 2 months, we were all joking around and having a good time laughing together. Now, in that class, there was a lovely girl named Ms. F. I was somewhat attracted to her. Not in a weird way, of course, but in a way that girls would think she was cute. I liked her as a person of the same sex. I was a bit dark and tall, so now that I think about it, I think there was probably some envy as well. Trying to be liked has an effect, and since we were in the same group when we switched seats, we gradually began to talk. When I found out that she was from a single mother family, we became even closer. However, in Ms. F's case, it was not that she was separated by death. I heard that her father ran away with another woman or something like that. When I learned that she, too, lived with only women, I truly felt glad that I had become friends with this girl. But that was only for a short time, until I went to visit her at her house. I don't remember why I decided to visit Mr. F's house that day. Partly because it was a long time ago, but more than that, what I saw at her house left such a strong impression on me. I guess those little things are a blur. Ms. S. was also there at the time. Until then, Ms. S. did not like Ms. F. very much. She did not seem to like the fact that I was getting along with her. So I can't remember why she followed me. But anyway, we were on our way home from school. Even though our homes were in completely different directions, Mr. S. and I dropped by Ms. F's house for some business. Her house was a one-story house that was, frankly, noticeably old. The wooden wall panels were warped, the yard was almost empty, and the space between the house and the neighbor's house was less than 50 centimeters. I was a little surprised, but then again, my grandmother's house is getting on in years. I felt ashamed of myself, thinking that it was no wonder the family was struggling to make ends meet. "Mommy!" Ms. F. called, and a beautiful lady with a beaming face came out from the back. Although her wrinkles were a little noticeable, she bowed deeply to me and Mr. S., to the point that we were almost afraid to bow to her. She seemed to be taking in the laundry and had a towel and underwear in her hand. "I'll bring you something to drink," she said, sounding quite happy. I thought, maybe it's because my daughter doesn't have many friends who come to our house to play. I thought that was because she did not have many friends who came to our house to play with her. In fact, Ms. F. also said, "I don't invite many people to my house." I ordered myself not to be surprised if F. San's room was not very girly. I didn't want to feel superior because of that. But when the door to her room opened, what caught my eye was something unexpected. I had already told you that Ms. F. was beautiful, but she was also very careful about her fashion. The room was more girly than I had expected, with brightly colored curtains hanging and a stuffed animal sitting on the desk. Except for one thing. The one that was standing in the corner of the room, looking at me. A mannequin. It was definitely a mannequin. I still cannot forget the sight of it. His hands were bent and contracted into the shape of a W, and he seemed to be staring straight at me. His face was very well formed, as is usual with mannequins. But that made his gaze seem even more lifeless and vacant. The mannequin was wearing a bright red sweatshirt and a hat. It was inappropriate, but it seemed much nicer than what the lady I had just seen was wearing. This. Ms. S. and I looked at Mr. F., stunned, but she did not seem surprised. She approached the mannequin and adjusted the angle of the hat with a slight touch. Watching the way he did it gave me goosebumps. "Isn't that cool?" Mr. F said, but his tone was somewhat soft. I was even more horrified by her not-so-happy tone. "Welcome," she said. The air was saved when a lady came in with a tray of cakes and tea. I guess she must have been as bored as I was, because she reached over and arranged the plates on the table. I tried to help, but there were 4 plates in all. My hand suddenly stopped as I wondered if the ant was going to eat too. At that moment, the lady took a plate of cake and tea and put it on Mr. F's desk with a smile on her face. It was right next to the mannequin. I had come to a terrible place, I thought. A cold, self-detectable sweat continued to run down my clothes, and it didn't stop. Ms. F was staring at the tea set beside the mannequin. From here, I could only see her hair. But suddenly she looked forward and poked at the cake with a fork as if nothing had happened. She passed the sugar jar to us. I thought I would ask about the mannequins. They seemed to treat them like human beings. They also seemed to treat them well, serving them cakes and dressing them in clothes. However, neither Mrs. F nor the ant talked to the mannequin. What do they think they are doing? I wondered. They definitely did not treat it like a mannequin. But what if they think and assume that they are completely human? If they thought of us as a person, they would call us he or she and explain to us what they are. It's not normal by any stretch of the imagination. I looked for something to talk about. There was a birdcage in the corner of the room. Anything but mannequins. I felt that as long as I saw Mrs. F as normal, as I would see him at school, I would be at ease. "Tori, do you have him?" "He's gone." "Oh, well. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't need him anymore." It was an inorganic way of talking. I couldn't feel any attachment to the bird I was keeping. I wanted to leave. I wanted to go home. I wanted to go home. This place is bad. If I stay here too long, I will go crazy. At that moment, "Where's the bathroom?" S stood up. "Just across the hall, right outside," Mrs. F answered. At that moment, I honestly cursed her. I kept looking down. I was convinced that I would no longer be able to communicate with Mrs. F, no matter what I said to him. It seemed like a very long time passed before I heard footsteps. In fact, it must have been only a few minutes. Mrs. S looked up and said to me, "Sorry, let's go home." His face was pale. He would never look at Mrs. F. He would never look at her. "Yes, welcome back," Mrs. F said. The way she said it was so off, I almost had a stroke. Mrs. S pulled me by the hand and tried to take me outside. I still felt that I should say "Oida masa" to my aunt, even if it was just a formality. I didn't dare face her, but I tried to talk to her in the back. The fasuma across Mrs. F's room was open about 20 centimeters. "Excuse me," I used to say. At that moment, a hand reached out from the gap in the door was closed with a snap. The fasuma, sliding door, was suddenly closed. We left Mrs. F's house as if we were trying to escape. On the way home, we pedaled our bicycles like crazy. Mrs. S rode in front of me the whole way, as if he wanted to go as far away from me as possible, even if it was just 1 meter. We returned to our usual way home without saying a word. When we finally reached a place where we felt safe, we bought a drink and quenched our thirst with a single-minded effort. "Stop going out with me," Mrs. S said. I didn't need to be told that. The house is in bad shape, and Mrs. F is in bad shape too. But the lady is crazy. She's totally. Auntie? M''S. Told us what happened when she went to the bathroom. When Ms. S left Ms. F's room, the sliding door next door was open. She casually tried to walk past it and saw the inside of the room. She saw 4 or 5 mannequin arms, lying around on the tatami mats. And the woman sitting on a cushion beside her was licking one of the arms like crazy. Ms. S did his business with a shiver, and on his way home, he passed by the fasuma door with trepidation. When she glanced over, her eyes met those of a lady who was staring at her. There was no trace of the smile she had on her face just a few moments before, and her eyes were completely vacant. Where the mannequin's arms used to be, there was a pile of folded laundry. Among them were a pair of men's underpants. Ma, the mannequin? Ms. S just said that and thought she had done it. The lady didn't say anything, but smiled at Ms. S again. It was right after that she rushed to take me out. It was so creepy that we stopped talking to her unless Ms. F came over to speak. And we became more and more estranged. I thought about spreading this story to everyone, but I don't think they would believe me. Even if I told this story to the children who were close to Ms. F, they would not believe me. They would only think that we were trying to isolate her. Especially since everyone knows that Ms. S did not get along with Ms. F very well. I asked the children, who said they went to Ms. F's house to talk to him secretly. But they all said they had not seen anything strange. So the situation was even worse for us. There was only one boy who had a strange experience. I went to Ms. F's house and pressed the bell, but no one answered. I was troubled by the fact that I had supposedly called in advance, but decided to wait anyway. I put my hand on the door, thinking that maybe he was in the back and couldn't hear me, and it rattled open. So he peeked inside. The fasuma was open and he could see the room. He could see the back of a man wearing a yukata. He was cross-legged facing the other side. I couldn't hear any sound, but I guessed he had a TV on. A blue light, which seemed to be coming from a cathode ray tube, was shining on his back and occasionally blinked on and off. But no matter how many times I called out to him, he didn't even look back, let alone move. I felt so bad that I went home. There should be no man in Ms. F's house. Even if they were relatives or acquaintances of her aunt, what was he doing sitting still with his back to the TV? Or were the man's pants his? I wondered if it might be a mannequin. But how could there be such a thing as a mannequin sitting cross-legged? If there were, it would have to be a different one from the one in Ms. F's room. Are there more mannequins in that house? I decided not to think about it any further. Now that 14 years have passed since then, I can look back with some calmness. I occasionally tell this story in places that have nothing to do with my hometown. To be honest, I still don't know what that was all about. If Ms. F and the others wanted to keep it a secret, if it was just me, who was close to them, why did they show it to Ms. S as well? I don't think I can come up with a satisfactory answer. Come to think of it, I have never seen a mannequin with arms in the shape of a W either. That would make it impossible to put clothes on them. However, that red dress fit the mannequin's body perfectly. It was as if he had put it on himself. This is my entire experience.